So, David, thank you very much. You agreed to help me with that. Small things which I'm doing, calling podcasts.
It's my pleasure.
And who don't know, David is an architect, retired already, who I used to work for a few years, and it was one of the best time on my architectural career I ever had. I learned a lot from you. Seriously. I thought that I know architecture when you give me the job. I was like smart ass who knows about computers. I remember in the old office, because we are in the new office, which one we build later on, but in your old office, when I come to interview, I saw that very old AutoCAD, old computer. I said, okay, I can improve here. I think they will give me the job. And I really fast found out that it's a lot of things I have to learn about architecture and about work, the way of work, efficient way of work in architecture. And I'm really happy that I was able to learn from you. So that's why we have this podcast, because I thought you are a great person and you can give someone to other people as well, not only to me.
Oh, that's very kind, Konrad. Thank you. How do I follow that?
And especially we have lunch after.
Yes.
So, David, can you tell us, how did you start architecture? Like, how it start? What was the decision of?
Gosh, that's going back a bit. My brother is an architect. He's 8 years older than me. And I was fascinated with the work that he was doing. And he used to help me sometimes with projects if I took them home. But right at the beginning, I thought, well, this is something that I could get a lot of enjoyment out of, because it's creative, it's imaginative, and you're transferring your thoughts into something that is tangible, such as ideas go down on paper, and they are then, or now on computer, and then they're transposed to a building site, and the building is then created. And you see the reality beginning to form itself from something that's just conjured up in your mind. And I found that magical, that whole process. So that really was probably going on in my mind when subconsciously probably, when I started applying for schools, to various schools of architecture and universities to study architecture.
And where did you study?
I studied at Leeds School of Architecture.
Because you are from North, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm from the north. I come from the Wirral, which is between Chester and Liverpool, and it's probably about 1.5 or 2 hours drive from the Wirral to get across to Leeds. So it worked quite well, really.
So you were studying in Leeds, and you graduate a couple of years after. And how has happened that between your study and you show up in Iran? Because what is interesting in all this story is that the biggest works, if I could remember, in your architectural careers, you did in Iran. And he was like freshman there who just come there and had to straight away be on top. So how has happened that you found this job in Iran?
Yes, well, after, of course, the architectural course is 5 years actually in college total, and then 2 years practical. Towards the end of those 5 years.
Sorry that I stop you. Just someone you have to guys remember. 5 years study plus 2 years practical. Let's give 7 years of study to become architect. Okay? At the moment, everyone can make planning applications without any education. If you ask yourself why the projects which one going through looks, especially small sizes, houses, are crap, that's the reason. That's exactly the reason. There is no study background from these people, and they're just going to do it whatever, copy the parts of the other people projects, and they submit it as their own projects. And it's not the greatest things ever. I think we should back to this what it was. That architect was the person who knows what he's doing, and not only designer, because these people don't use name architects; they just designers. Sorry for that. It just
No,
it's always
that's a good point.
pain in my heart when I see these projects. We had a couple of projects like that we had to fix it after. Even for we received the projects and they asked us to do a building control for it, and you saw that the principle of design is just wrong. That whoever will live there after a few years will not be happy with the place, because architecture for me is create the space for people, not create art only. If it's beautiful, that's great, but it have to be functional for people. And most of these designers, they just I believe there is a couple of good ones, but most of them, they just do it whatever. They don't care.
That's a good point.
Do it very fast. Take money. Next one. It's factory.
Right.
Yeah, sorry, we're back.
Very true. Interesting aside. The Iran connection. After 4 years of studying in college, we had a Christmas party. And what we used to do at Christmas time was invite the girls from the fashion design college, which is called the Jacob Kramer College.
To be honest, everyone is doing that field still now.
Yes.
That didn't change.
Which was next to our college. We used to invite them over for the Christmas party. And I remember she was getting heavily chatted at by a Turkish architect, and I saved her from this guy.
He was the hero.
and took her out of the party. We went to the Marion Centre coffee bar where I ordered bacon sandwiches, not realising that she had a Muslim background. But we hit it off from there, and I suppose it was another year before we got married.
How old have you been then?
I was 23 when we got married in Iran.
Oh, so you married in Iran already?
Well, what we did, first of all, after we met, I went to visit her country. She invited me to Tehran. And I thought, wow, this is fantastic. She said...
and which year it was? Because
that was 1973.
So it is before revolution.
Oh, yes, well before the revolution. The revolution was
79.
1979. That's correct. And it was an amazing place to visit because there's beautiful cities like Isfahan, Shiraz, Yazd, and also the mountains in the north, the Damavand, which had snow on all the year round, which knocked me out completely because I had no inkling that Iran actually had such visual beauty and climatic change. Of course, it's a huge country. It's the size of the common market.
Yeah, that's quite big.
Absolutely massive. And so I went over there to visit her family, and then we got married while we were over there. And we were invited.
So when you're going there, you didn't plan the wedding?
No, I had a feeling that this was on the cards because we had talked in vague terms about it. But we thought, well, rather than set the whole thing up again in the future, because it wasn't easy to get to Iran.
Did your parents been there?
No, not at all. My father had died by then, but my mother didn't even know about the first marriage in Tehran. We kept it a secret because she wouldn't wanted to have known that we were living in sin for another year before we got married in the UK. We got married in the UK a year after, which was...
So you had two weddings.
So we had two weddings. In fact, we had two weddings in Iran that year because we were invited to a wedding down in Shiraz. And wife's family were pretty well connected. And one of the close relatives, really, was a chap called Senator Mesbazadeh, who was very close to the Shah. But a friend of his, who was the senator of Shiraz, his daughter was getting married in Shiraz. And so we were invited down to the wedding, and it was a very big party. And there were a lot of people from the newspaper group, the Kehan newspaper. And I had a few drinks with them, as you do. And they were very partial to whiskey, Scottish whiskey. And we were invited into an annex where they had people seated, and this is slightly separate from the main wedding. We had no idea this was going to happen. And everybody stood up as we went into the room. And I said to my wife, "What's going on here?" And she said, "I think they're going to marry us." So
that's a very interesting surprise.
our wedding was planned for 10 days after that in Tehran. So it was a bit of a shock for me as well. But they had...
That's the story.
They had a theologian there who's a bit like a mullah, but he graduated at Oxford, and he spoke with a very nice English accent, and he said, "Hello, David." He said, welcome to your wedding." And I said, still in shock. There was a roasted lamb on the table and glasses of wine, which you wouldn't see these days. And Shiraz, of course, was famous for its wine.
Yeah, it was the wine Shiraz is coming from the city.
Yes. And the theologian said, "Do you know the Salvat?" And I'd partially learned the Salvat, which is a thing you recite, which is Besmillahir Rahmanir Rahim Allahumma Salli Allah Muhammad Vali Muhammad. I have to do this 7 times. And I managed to do it. I said, "Very good." He said, "I thought you'd be following me word for word." And then some people applauded. And they were extremely nice. There was after this festival, for the wedding, there was another festival, which is an international festival going on in Shiraz, which was very, well attended. We were taken by car by the senator's driver to see this festival, and it was just a whole amazing night. It was so good, and so then we had the main wedding in Tehran 10 days later. And then a year later, and amazingly, on the same day, which is the 24th of August.
That's fortunate.
By pure chance, because their calendar is totally different in Iran. And this just happened. On the 24th of August, the following year, we got married in the UK. And my mother was under the impression that we were going from this wedding to Tehran to get married. And we showed all the photographs when we returned. From a short holiday in Tehran that time. And I had much longer hair. And she
figured it out.
You look quite different. She figured it out, but she didn't say anything. But I think we got away with it just about.
Oh my God!
It was interesting. It was an interesting journey to get over to Tehran, because I drove from Leeds. Across Europe and across Turkey.
So you drove there?
I drove. Yeah, I had a.
That was a trip, because how long it takes?
It took about 8 days.
A day.
Or 9 days. I stopped in Venice, because I've never been to Venice.
So if someone will say that the 12 hours flight is much too long, guys, remember 8 days.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And it was quite an interesting journey, because the roads were good up to Istanbul, but once you travelled east of Istanbul, they were really dodgy in those days. The Turkish roads were pretty awful, and you couldn't get. It was very, very difficult to get insurance, motor insurance, and so I wasn't even insured for that journey from Istanbul via Ankara right through to Erzurum and to the Iranian border, which was also, it was quite dangerous at night, because there was a lot of trouble, or the Turks would say trouble, with the Kurdish militia, and there was a lot of fighting going on sometimes at night. I actually had a puncture on a remote road about a day's drive from the border, on the border with Iran, that is. And a Turkish army jeep with a machine gun on the back, and 2 guys enthusiastically jumping off and saying in Turkish, I think, what has happened is dangerous here. I think this is assuming it, because they kept making signs like pretending to cut the throat and pointing at the mountains, where I thought there was some sort of army exercise going on. But in fact, there was a full-scale battle going on between the Turkish troops and the Kurds. And you could see tracer bullets and mortars and things like this going off. And so they helped me change the wheel. They're extremely helpful, nice guys. I gave them some cigarettes, offered them a drink, and they said, no chance, no. They gave me the cut neck sign again, which meant they'd be in trouble if they had any alcohol. And they escorted me to a lorry park nearby, which had quite a lot of British lorries in it. And Turkish troops had dug in around the car park to actually, in case of any attack from the Kurds. And the British lorry drivers were quite amazed at me getting this military escort to the car park.
So an important ride.
And, they say, look at this guy, he must be somebody special. But so the following day, the border was open, and I could drive through to right through to Iran, a place that used to be called Rezaie. So that was part of the journey. Yeah, it was interesting.
So after your wedding, you stay in Iran, isn't it, or you stay in Leeds?
No, after the wedding, we stayed for about 4 weeks, I think, in Iran, and then came back to the UK, worked for a year, and then got married in the Wirral.
Yeah, again.
Again.
So many weddings just one life.
Yes, we went to the registry office in the Wirral, and then went to the church service in the Wirral. So in total, we got married 4 times, I think.
Wow.
Because the church service actually was a blessing.
Mm-hmm. Because Jali's Muslim, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
She's Muslim, your wife, Jali.
Muslim, yes.
Yeah, she's Muslim.
Yeah.
So how it works with the Christian wedding?
Well, it was a blessing.
It was a blessing.
It was a blessing. One of the churches wouldn't marry us because of that, different religion. Mm-hmm. But the church I used to be in the choir, Church of England, where I used to be in the choir up to about the age of 12. The vicar, whose brother was a colonel in Oman in the British military, said, "I've got no qualms at all about blessing you in the church where you were actually in the choir," and he was extremely good, very helpful, and we had a full-scale blessing in St Hildeberg's Church in Hoylake. So that worked very well. Yeah.
So you worked in UK as an architect for 3 years, yeah, more or less after wedding.
Yes.
So from where come decision to go to Iran to work there?
Yes. In fact, it was probably about 2.5 to 3 years. You're quite right. After we got married, I was offered a job through a relative of my wife's, actually in Tehran. And they were paying 3 times what I was earning.
That sounds
in the UK.
Promising.
So I said, well, let's go. So she went with my son, who was then 6 months old, and they got the flat ready and everything else. And I followed through about 3 months later by car.
Again.
So it was fascinating. Trip that one, but and then I worked for about 1 day for the relative. It was a dreadful office.
1 day, that's
no
a very
windows.
short
It was
time.
a site office, dust everywhere, and he was not the greatest person to work with. So I said to my wife, "I'm not working here any longer." But so she had a word. It's who you know out there, with a relative who who knew somebody in an office in Tehran called Modam, or Shakati Modam, M-O-D-A-M. That was the initials of the partners. The partners were all Harvard graduates, and one of them was in fact a lecturer at Harvard.
Oh,
and so it was sort of American-Iranian office, but with a big British input too, because one of their main projects was Shiraz University, physics and chemistry building at Shiraz University, which was a big project, and that was designed by a British firm of architects called Max Fry and Jane Drew in London. And all the drawings had been sent over to Tehran, and they said, "Would you like to be lead architect on this project in Shiraz?" Which was a big shock for me because I was 28 years old.
3 years professional work and lead architect. That's
Yes.
a huge jump.
Yes, and I said on my own. They said, "No, you'll have a team of guys helping you in the office," and they were mostly Iranian or.
Which year it was?
This would have been 1977. I think.
77.
77.
So 2 years before revolution.
That's right.
And did you have a language barrier with them, or your
Yeah, they couldn't speak English.
That's their fault.
So so they said it's no problem. They said you can learn Farsi. So I had to go to Farsi class, and it was one night a week at the Iran America Society, where they had some very good Iranian Farsi teachers. And even though it was just as well, because they asked me to do a presentation about 6 months later of some of the drawings to the rest of the team, because we had a big team of mechanical and electrical,
how many people?
Structural engineers, architects, in the whole team.
Yeah.
In Tehran, I think there was probably about half a dozen, or maybe 8. I think 8, and then we had a site team in Shiraz, which was I can't remember. They had an office further working on the drawings that I'd been working on. And so I used to fly down to Shiraz, and we had a German contractor who
You've been already the lead architect for this project.
Yeah.
That's the university, isn't it?
It was the university building. It was the physics and chemistry building at Shiraz University, or Soktamani Physique Chemie, as it's called in Farsi.
To be honest, it's amazing that lead architect for building like that, which is very representative, is only 28 years old.
Yes.
That's something.
But it was quite terrifying, because when I had to give a presentation, it was quite easy because I knew the words for like foundations and steelwork and brickwork and and basic design drawings, and I wasn't sure how well it had gone, and I got a big slap on the back from another Harvard graduate who was their structural engineer, called Mohandas Ehsan, very nice guy, and he said, "Well done, Dave," and I thought that was marvelous. To completely over the moon, went downstairs to get a taxi home, and I couldn't. My Farsi was so inept, I couldn't instruct the taxi driver how to get me back to the flat. So I thought I need a lot more.
Take me London.
a lot more lessons. So I had a few more lessons and was able to get away with colloquial Farsi. But it was interesting time.
So what's happened next? Because
then the revolution started to kick up.
And did you work during that time there? Still?
Yes, we were working during that time, and I remember one weekend we went to Yazd, a whole crowd of us from the office, the Americans and Australians and British architects. I suppose there were about and their wives as well. 8 or 9 of us got on a train in Tehran. It was a sleeper train because Yazd is quite a long way from Tehran. And Yazd is a beautiful city. It was completely unspoiled. I don't know what it's like now, but I think it's still pretty unspoiled. And it was famous for its wind towers, which are ornate towers designed to catch the desert winds, which are funneled down through the towers through earthenware ducts into the rooms below. And apparently it's completely free energy. And they are still preferred to modern air conditioning systems.
Oh.
And they were very nice architectural features because they were ornately designed these wind towers, and they became interesting features on the skyline. So we stayed in a hostel in Yazd, and took lots of photographs of buildings. We got up onto the roofs of some of the mosques, and we were allowed access to these fantastic roofscapes, taking lots and lots of photographs. And as long as that was okay, as long as the women wore chadors, which is the dress for covering the body, and the head. And we went back. I think after we spent 2 days there, and we went to the station, and the station was surrounded by army lorries. And we thought, what's going on here? They said, there's been a threat from rebels that the station might be under attack. So we had no problems. We got onto the train, and the train left on time, and then it stopped after about, I don't know how many hours, but as soon as we got to a place called Gum, which is south of Tehran, and it's only about, I suppose, about 3/4 of an hour south of Tehran. And the line was blocked by rebel forces, people who were demonstrating against the Shah's regime. And we got out into the station. That was surrounded by military army lorries and buses. So we were bussed, actually, back into Tehran. We were trying to get to the office because we didn't want to be late. But then the buses stopped, and then we got into individual taxis. And we realised how bad things were because we saw cars upside down burning. And our taxi driver was extremely adept of very fast driving away from any gunfire. And so we got to the office. I phoned because my wife hadn't been able to go on this trip because our son was very young at that time. He was about 2.5, I think.
So 79. We're already talking about 79.
This is 78.
78.
78. This is November 78. Oh no, actually this is October 78. And we got to the office and went onto the roof of the office, and we could see where all the from that vantage point we could see where all the fires and problems and trouble was around the office area. Some of the guys couldn't get back to where they were staying. One chap came to stay with us, very nice guy. I haven't seen him for a long time. And we people were advised to fill their baths with water because they were expecting water shortages. And there was a lot of shooting going on. And they also, I phoned my wife before I went home. I said, I've got Tony coming back to our place tonight because he can't get to his place. She said, no, that's no problem. I said, is it all right at home? Is it sat quiet? She held the telephone up, and you could hear all this shooting going on in the background.
Wow.
And I said, what's happening? She said, well, they've set fire to the Intercontinental Hotel and also our favourite Mexican restaurant at the end of the road where we lived. I realised then
basically
things were getting very serious.
She was on the middle of the revolution, on the middle of the war zone.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So when things quietened down a bit, we went back to our place. Tony came to stay overnight, and the following morning it was completely quiet. And we went out to see what was going on, and there were tanks on every roundabout. But what I noticed were the guns on the tanks were pointing towards the university, which a lot of the demonstrations were down in the university. And I said, this isn't good.
That's bad.
And I spoke to my wife, and she was advised by well-connected relatives that we ought to leave very soon. I spoke to one of the partners in the office. He said, you don't need to worry. He said, if there's any trouble, you just go down to your embassy. They'll sort things out. So I phoned the embassy up. And I said, will everything be okay, do you think? He said, oh, yes, we expect things to quieten down. That night, the consulate section was burnt down at the British Embassy.
Oh, my.
And there were plans to get up to another compound called the Gulhak compound in North Tehran. And I said, I said to Johnny, this is developing quickly. So we made plans to leave. It was very difficult to get money out of the bank. Each bank was only permitted to take, I think it was £2,000. And we had quite a lot of money at that time because I was getting well paid. And I went to a whole stack of different banks to withdraw the money during one day. And we got the money out.
Two grants each bank.
I'm within, exactly, 2,000 from each bank. And we're within...
Can I ask you, average salary during this time in UK, how much it was?
At that time, I was probably earning around about 2,000. And over there, I was earning 10,000.
Yeah, that's a big difference.
Yeah. 200, I think just over 2,000, 2,300 or something I was earning, and which wasn't bad. But over there it was 10,000.
8 of 70s, that was quite nice salary because, I don't know what is at the moment, the salary, average salary in UK, but I'm assuming it's around 2 grand at the moment.
It's how much?
Around 2,000.
2,000
pounds.
I'm sorry.
As a salary at the moment.
Yeah.
So to remove all this money, and during the war, or practically, it was just amazing. You have to go to so many banks, bank to bank, with all this money, which one was worth much more than now, and nobody robbed you.
That's right. It was, but the one thing that it's very different. For example, from the situation in Sudan today, or the situation as it was in Afghanistan. Iranian people are naturally very welcoming for foreigners. And if there was trouble in the street or whatever, they would look after you because they would try and protect foreign people from any trouble.
That's amazing.
And they would even invite you into their houses and offer you a meal. We never felt threatened as foreigners. And in fact, I remember once with my son James, taking him to the park, and I asked him to stand in front of a chieftain tank, which they were taking order of at the moment. They were renewing all their tanks with Chobham armour, a huge supply, which was contentious later on. And there was an army major on the tank, next to the tank, and he said, "What are you doing?" in very good English. And I said, "I'm taking a photograph of my son." And he said, "I have orders to break cameras of people who are taking photographs of military hardware." And I said, "I'm taking a photograph of my son." He said, "I can see that." And he winked and he said, gave me a wave, and I said, "Thank you." And so people were always very genial and friendly, and it was a completely different atmosphere from what you see in hotspot evacuations these days.
Yeah. So
that's it. Yeah.
Why did you evacuate from Iran? Why did you fly out?
Well, we got to Mehrabad airport. I suppose about 3 or 4 weeks after that situation I told you about when we came back from Yazd.
Yeah.
We managed to sell most of the stuff we had in our flat. Mm-hmm. And then I organised taxis. I also had my tickets endorsed for every airline because there's a rumour going around that the airlines would not be flying or they'd go on strike. My main ticket was booked with Iran Air, which is a very good carrier in those days. We got to the airport after a very expensive taxi ride. They were profiteering, ferrying people to the airport, and it was a bit chaotic at the airport. We got on Iran Air was flying, marvelous. So we got on the plane, and as we took off, the pilot said, "If you look below you, you can see the airport, which is now closed." And they had actually closed. We were the last flight out of Mehrabad airport. The airport closed below us, and a lot of our friends were stuck there in Tehran for 3 months or so, and they just had to keep their heads down because it got much busier. This was on the last day of November.
78?
In 1978. And, it was a very different situation after we left. So that really is
Conclude the flight.
concludes the experience in Iran. I mean, lots of other things happened.
You back to Iran afterwards with your
No,
wife?
I've never been back.
Never been to
My
Iran?
wife has. My wife has, yes.
Okay. Now, did she say how Iran has changed?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, she went on. It just happened to. It was her Nowruz, New Year, which also coincides with her birthday, which is March the 18th. And when she went to Tehran, there was a party for her. Relatives organised a party, and this is only, I think, about 3 or 4 years after the revolution. And they were playing music, and there were men and women at the party, all relatives.
Like on the party?
Yeah. And there was a knock on the door. My son told me about it later. He said it was fantastic. He said, there's a knock on the door, and all these men came in with machine guns, and they were what they call the committee, who had a complaint, or somebody had heard the music being played, which was outlawed at that time. Parties were outlawed, and men should not be meeting with women unless they had proper identification to prove that they were actually relatives. So when they had the banging on the door downstairs, all the men left the party and went onto the roof of the building and hid on the roof.
Wow.
And so that was the first 24 hours of my wife returning to Tehran. So things had,
nice welcome.
Things had changed dramatically.
So
yeah.
by make the party, did they risk their lives?
Did they?
The men's, if they would be catched there.
Well, they would. They could very easily have been taken to Evin prison and questioned, and if they didn't have the right identification to show that they were relatives or whatever, they could very easily have been lashed, whipped.
Yeah.
So it was a whole
unpleasant thing.
Totally different society. Yeah.
Wow. So, because to be honest, before we had this conversation, what I did, I started looking for information about Iran before the revolution, and all the pictures I saw, it looks like very open labor society, and it was amazing.
Yes.
It was like much forward than what we had on the West.
Yes.
And everything what I found after the revolution is like back to the Middle Ages.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
It's amazing how it's changed.
Yes,
in such a short time,
and especially at the moment with this terrible situation where, since the girl who was Kurdish origin, I think, was executed for not wearing the hijab or chador. And it's almost a revolutionary situation there now in most of the Iranian cities, and it's not being reported very much at the moment because we don't have reporters over there.
To be honest, everyone is reporting Ukrainian war at the moment.
Yes, that's right, and Sudan
because it's nearby.
That's right.
But things like that happen all around the world, and. Especially Iran is interesting because if I could remember, they have an atomic weapon, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, with not yet, I don't think.
Or they was developing. There was
developing it.
There was a lot of information that they developing, or they already did. They just didn't report it.
Yeah, I mean the Iranians say that their nuclear capability is for civil use, not military use. When I worked in Iran. In fact, the physics and chemistry building in Shiraz had a large nuclear laboratory for students to learn about nuclear science, and the Shah was very forward-thinking. He was saying we won't always be an oil-rich nation. We need to be looking at other forms of power. So the French were brought in. It was a very big program to build nuclear reactors for civil use. And I believe that a lot of those reactors were further developed by the Russians in liaison with the Iranians. And that's why the Russians were also saying, no, they're for civil use because we've helped build them.
That makes suspicious.
Yes, it does now. Yes. So it was, but a very different society then. Yeah. But now I don't think the nuclear issue is, it's a card that they could play, I suppose. But I don't know how far who knows how far they've got with development of, nuclear weapons or whatever.
Just from an architectural point, did you finish this university building during your time there, or they didn't finish the build?
The foundations were in. I used to,
because I understand the project was complete.
Exactly, the project, all the drawings were completed and everything else. I used to go down for regular site meetings, and we had a very entertaining German contractor who knew all the Iranian jokes and he could tell very good jokes in English, Farsi, or German, and he was getting on very well with the site. A very popular guy and an extremely good contractor. All work stopped with the revolution, and I never knew. I have the drawings actually here somewhere, rolled up in the loft, I think. And I never knew whether the building had been completed or not, but I looked on Google Earth and I saw that it had all been constructed, all been completed. And it looks exactly the same as the scheme that we had prepared. But the foundations were in anyway, so it was very difficult. Yeah. It was a very complicated building, and it was a radial design. And the Shah had located that building on the top of a mountain previously. He'd flown over it with a helicopter and said, I want the building to go there. And they found out that there were caves, and it wouldn't have been a stable structure if they'd built it there. So they built it further down the mountain, a few hundred yards further down where the ground conditions were better. And I don't think they ever told the Shah, because it would have been...
That would be short conversation. Or short conversation.
But and the building was set out to a node point that originally was at the top of the mountain, but that node point was shifted further down, so the radial angles were set out from it, and it was a very complicated structure, but it worked very well. Yeah,
that's good. That sounds very nice.
So, and it was very nice to see on Google Earth, because they had some ground shots taken by students. And so we could see the elevation quite clearly. And so I was very pleased to see that building had been completed.
So then you back to England and work here?
Yes.
And it was change of the scale of the projects?
Yes. I worked for a firm in London, just off Regent Street. On airport projects, because I'd also, while I was in Iran, worked on Shiraz International Airport, the new airport for Shiraz, and so I had some experience with airport design, and so they were doing airport projects at this particular practice. So I worked on one Middle Eastern airport, and I forget where it was now, and then. I worked there for a year, and then got a job with a practice in Radlett, who were doing some large projects in central London, and also Swansea Town Centre, new development, and also around the Great West Road, and so I spent quite a long time. I think it was about 4.5, 5 years working with them, And there were the good practice to work for, and then I started building up my own private portfolio of projects. And they said, when I handed in my notice, they said, "Oh, you're running two of our largest projects, which was an office development in Windsor and an RMC home care development in Chesham." And they said, "Would you take these into your own practice, and it would help you for the first year, but the responsibility is still with, the practice I was working for, or had been working for,
honest, which was a nice deal,
which was very nice, and that set me up really, because that enabled me to get my feet on the ground, and also during that period I was bringing in private projects, other projects as well. So that's how I started in private practice. Yeah.
Did you work for Iranian people here?
I had quite a few Iranian clients. I think I said 2 or 3 before, but I suppose I must have had half a dozen different Iranian clients. People who'd taken money out of Iran after the revolution, and they were doing development. A lot of the work was in Hampstead. Very nice projects.
It's good area in London.
Yeah, Bishop's Avenue, Winnington Road, those sort of areas, and they were upmarket project. I can tell you a funny story about one of them, which was in Winnington Road. The client was asking me, because his main project wasn't development. His main work wasn't development. His main work was like a Mr. Fix-It for companies like Shell or BP, and he used to arrange overseas markets for them. He accumulated quite a lot of money, and he rang me up one night at 12 o'clock at night. I remember I was asleep, and he says, "I've done what you told me to." And I said, "What's that?" And apparently at a party, he'd asked me what he should do with some of this money, and I said, "Buy a property nearby, refurbish it, and put it back on the market." And he said, "I've done it. I've done what you told me to."
So you become the financial advisor.
And he said, "If I pay you a proper fee," he said, "would you like to be the architect for it?" And I said, yes, certainly. It was an interesting project. It was Hampstead Garden Suburb Trust area. And at the end of this project, when it was ready for the defects inspection and issuing the practical completion certificate, I was on site with the builders. A lot of them are Irish, and a fleet of black cars pulled up outside, most of them Rolls Royces or Bentleys. And I said, "What on earth's going on here?" And the client came in, and he said, "I've got the Brunei royal family outside." And we thought it was hilarious. We thought he was joking. And then they came in.
There was no joke.
He said they can't announce these visits because of security. They don't announce them in advance. And although they did have security with them. And the builders ran off into different parts of the property saying, "I can't be seen by royalty in my wellies." And they must have walked through the building for about 20 minutes. Then they came out, and the client looked very happy. And he saw them out of the door. Then he came back in, and he said, "They've bought it." I said, "How do you know?" He said, "They shook hands." And he said, "Forget the paperwork. If you get a handshake from a member of the royal family,
It's done.
The agreement's actually made, and it's done."
Yeah, unfortunately, not many people have this kind of beliefs in handshake.
That's right. And another project which was enjoyable, very enjoyable project, was for St. Luke's Hospice, which is a hospice that
I know this hospice. I did works on it with you. I've been there once.
Ah, right.
Yeah, because when I started to work with you, you they always coming back to you for so small things. And
Yes.
remember, they was doing some new entrance on front, car park gate, and they asked us to do it. So I went there to take dimensions of everything.
Yeah, we refurbished and extended an old manor house for them in Kenton.
Is that the hospice? Is the one which one was opened by Queen, isn't it?
Yes, it was. That's right. And when it was completed, the Queen opened it, which was nice to have on the website. The fact that not many people have had the Queen open their building, so that was a nice project.
You assume your career is at like university in Iran, airports in Iran, buildings opened by Queen, Burn royal family buying your buildings. That's quite nice dossier, to be honest, if you put all together.
Yeah, so interesting, good fun, all of it.
So how has happened that from how many did you had any architects works for you during this time?
Yes, you're talking about in the UK.
Yes.
Yes. There's George Mundy, Scottish architect,
Which is incredible person.
and George worked with me for over 20 odd years. Good architect and good to work with. And a Polish architect called
It's me.
Konrad, who's sitting opposite me here, and various other architects over the years, and technicians and
Because what I noticed is
people.
that you changed the scale of the company from very big one, like in Iran or Australia after you back to UK, to
Small
quite
practice,
small
yeah,
practice.
small practice, that's
And
right.
the scale of projects changed as well.
Yeah, it did. I mean, the largest, I suppose, the most people we ever had was about 5, and a lot of the time, two or three of us working. So it's always been a small practice. Yeah.
No, to be honest, enjoyable place. I remember George, and he was always somewhere deep on the corner behind. Like, I don't want second screen in my computer. I don't need it till he have it.
Yes.
No, George is amazing. Did you speak with George those days?
Yes, we went out for lunch quite recently with George and his wife, and everything seems to be going well in his household. Certainly, yeah,
That's great.
yeah.
No, to be honest, the time spent in the RYA was a good time for me. I really enjoyed it. To prove it, I was coming to this office 2 hours each way, but I really enjoyed the work here. So that was good, really good time.
But it was always good working with you, Konrad.
Thank you.
That's absolutely true.
So how it looks your life now? Because you retired.
Yeah, my new life as a retired architect. Yes.
Very busy. To prove it's busy, I can say because we are now in your office, which one we built during the work when I work for you.
Yes.
And it's amazing office. I love it. Very small, but at the same time very nice, warm, and with the most beautiful view ever, like greenery through the windows there.
Mm-hmm.
And now this office still exists and still office. It's not, you didn't change it for the room.
No, it's an escape for me at the moment. I come here, check emails. I've got 2 jobs still finishing off on site. But other than that, I mean, ultimately, it will be just used as a study or occasional workroom. That's or Airbnb. You never know.
Who knows? Question. I remember once you told me the story about some Iranian clients who didn't know you speak Farsi. Do you remember?
Yes.
Can you tell that story?
Okay.
And
Okay.
tell how it starts.
Yeah.
Because it's a very good story. I love it.
Yes. Yes. I won't mention names in case.
No, you don't have to
I won't
mention names. Just tell the story.
He was a wealthy man. This Iranian client, and he was notoriously difficult to get fees out of. And he was a nice enough guy, but very slow on payments. And we did some work for him on a property in, I think it was Bishop's Avenue in Hampstead.
That was from your private practice.
Yeah. And I said it was a small amount. Well, it was quite a lot of money, really, in those days. I think it was about £800. And he said, come down to my office in London and I'll pay you, which was, I don't know why he couldn't just send me a cheque. But I thought, well, if he's promising to pay, I'm going to go and get it. So
good enough.
I went to see him at his office in London, waited while he was chatting to somebody else. And then it was a lot of small talk, very nice chat. And he counted out £50 notes. And then more small talk. He didn't know that I knew any Farsi, but he was chatting occasionally to his friend who was still sitting, waiting while I was paid and left. And I said, thank you very much, and I hope hope you have a good day. Left the room, and I thought I'd just check the numbers of 50s, and it was £50 short. So I thought, I have to go back in there. There's no doubt about it, because if I leave this, it'd be very difficult to get it back. So I went back into the room and I said, I'm sorry, I've just checked. I think you've miscounted the number. We're £50 short. And he looked at me and he very quickly went through it and then gave me another 50. And his colleague said in Farsi, Baroye Nachamichaid, which means he wants it for his lunch. And I said, just as I was leaving, Agha man nacha khodam, which was, Mister, I have already had my lunch. And they both looked in shock and said, how you know Farsi?
How you don't pay 50 quid?
Exactly. And then we all laughed, and I left.
Yeah,
so it was left on a good note. I'm surprised you remembered that one.
No, I remember you told me that once. The story. I did really like it. It's really like from movie removed.
Yeah.
Like, no, the things like that can't happen. It's just not happening. But they do.
Yeah.
Any of your kids speak Farsi?
They speak basic, but they understand a lot of it. They don't, and they can speak a little of it. But James should be the best of them all, because he's the youngest. He's the oldest, I should say. And
You've been there.
He actually was there when I was working there. But he can understand quite a bit when he listens to people talking. He doesn't speak it very much. And the other two are always correcting my pronunciation. So they've picked it up quite well. My son, James, and of course, two girls, Julia and Andrea.
Did your kids ever go to Iran?
They've all been to Iran when they were very young. But they haven't been for a long time.
And you don't think to go back to Iran to see how it looks now?
I'd love to go. I'd love to go back. It's not a good time to go at the moment.
Yeah, it's never a good time to go there.
No.
Since the revolution, there is not a good time to go there.
I mean, if there's another revolution, maybe I will.
After the revolution.
Yes. But
hopefully, to be honest.
I'd love to go back, because I like the Iranian people, I like the countryside and the architecture, the buildings, and I travelled extensively when I was over there. So I've seen a lot of what Iran has to offer, and architecturally and scenically, it's exceptional. And people still don't know that they have amazing ski resorts there.
What?
And they have a 3-month skiing season. And in fact, 20 minutes from where we lived in Tehran, there was a ski lift that took you right up into the mountains. They call it teleski.
Nobody really much Iran and
telecabin.
ski, to be honest. That's hard to
No,
imagine.
it's hard to get there. The Shah built two very nice resorts. One at Dizin and Shemshak were exceptional, and they were modelled on Swiss resorts, which the Shah used to regularly ski at. And they were well ahead of their time, and I believe they're still very good, except men are separated from women when they go skiing. For some amazing. Also, the other nice place to go was to drive through the mountains of the north, over the Damavand mountains, and then down towards the Caspian Sea, through the tea plantations, down to the places like Ramsar or we used to go to a motel there called Motel Roux, Motels, which is Motel Swan Motel, really is in English. And I remember the first time we went there. We've been driving through these tea plantations for about an hour, and I said, my brother-in-law said, "What would you like to drink?" And I said, "I really fancy a nice cup of tea." And so he ordered tea, and the agha, or the waiter, came through with a tray with beautifully arranged, teapot and water and cups and all the rest of it. And I noticed, to my shock, there was a Lipton's tea bag.
You didn't expect that.
I said, "What about?" I pointed out the window. I said, "What about all your local teas?" He said, "No, this is tourist tea." He said, "Tourists want Liptons." So it's very sad, isn't it?
Tourists don't want Lipton. Tourists want to check something,
We-
something there, something from their origin.
We noticed it in when I was working in Tehran. We used to go down to the bazaar where they had sackfuls of spices, and they were very, very cheap spice there. You could get anything, beautiful, colourful powdered spices. Is that?
Keep going.
It's great. And they would shovel this stuff by the kilo into your bag if you wanted to buy any. The Americans in the office used to be in horror of the fact that the American wives preferred to have Schwartz spices. And I think the inflation, the actual price was about 1,000 times more, because they'd gone from along the old Silk Route. Well, they'd gone from Iran to America, flown straight to America, I think, and then through a whole stack of middlemen. They're doing packaged and then sent back again, and everybody was taking their rake off. And they were enormously expensive by the time these little tiny packets of Schwartz spices came back to Tehran. And but
Could it be easier to buy straight away there?
well, exactly. So but they wouldn't actually go down to the bazaar and buy it fresh from by the kilo.
Yeah.
And the
for a fraction of price.
the American architects were embarrassed about this. Sorry.
No worries.
Hello, James. I'm in the middle of doing a podcast at the moment. Hello. I'll give you a ring back. I've got Konrad here as well, so I'll give you a ring back after. Okay. Okay. Take care. All the best. Bye bye.
I forgot to ask to switch off the phones. No worries.
I don't think it'll go again.
No, it's live.
You can edit these out, can you?
Nah, I will keep it.
Really?
It's part of the life. It's how the conversation. To be
good.
honest, podcast for me is the conversation between people,
Yeah.
and things like that happen during the conversation.
Oh, I see. Right.
It's like normal life.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
It's not interview. It's
Yeah.
to be honest, I wanted to know more about your time in Iran. When you was architect there, how it looks.
Yes.
When I work with you, we didn't really have a time for this conversation to find what's really happened in Iran, because we did work. We had lots of different conversations, but not that one. And I thought it would be great, to just jump into this subject and see, what is there. And I'm really happy we did it. So I don't treat podcast as an interview. For me, it's just learning curve. As you know, I'm a scriptwriter as well, and
Yes.
I'm writing the scripts, which I'm happy with. And
Was my approach formal? Too formal?
no, it's great.
Oh, good.
And listen stories like that, like put me some ideas,
Yes.
which I want to in future probably use in some, some scenes, some parts of the
right.
stories, like the story of this two gentlemen and 50 quids.
Yeah.
It's like from the movie. Seriously, it's like remove, and it can be to use in any different environment. It can
Yes.
be used with, someone can collect money for anything, and the guys can be Chinese, the guys can be Japanese, Iranian, or somewhere from Africa, whatever. But the way the surprise, you surprise them. That's the essential of it.
Yeah.
So things like that, I'm collecting that, and the main reason I started to do it podcast is to have the conversations like that and to learn something. So it's not done, as a work. I'm doing that for fun. I don't have any money from it, so
No.
so far so good.
Well, I could tell you about the. It's on now, is it?
Yeah.
That journey when I drove through to Iran
Yeah, come on.
in the car, I had a huge roof rack on the top of the car with all loads of stuff I was taking over, and I was on my own.
So that was the time when you was going into Iran to meet your wife, who was she was already there.
No, actually, that first time I went by train.
Oh,
I got the Vangolu Express from Istanbul, which is an amazing journey. It really was. That's another story, though. That really is an interesting story. But when I went by car to bring all the stuff over, because my wife had got the flat ready and everything else, I stopped just outside Istanbul, and there's a car behind me. It was an Iranian guy, a young Iranian guy, same age as me then, who was also driving to Tehran. And he said, I've been following you. It looks like we're going on the same route and all the rest of it. He'd been a student in the UK. And I said, I'm looking for somewhere for lunch. And he said, well, there's a little cafe over here. Let's try this one. So we went into this cafe, sat down, ordered a little Turkish cafe, ordered some food. There was a huge fish tank on the servery. It was enormous. It must have been about, let me think now, probably about 10 feet long. And it had lots of exotic, fish, beautiful colours and swimming around. And there was another table which was occupied by some Turkish guys who were sitting next to another group of Turkish guys on another table. And they started shouting at the people on the other table. And we thought it was just friendly banter. And then one of them picked up a chair and broke it over the head of one of the people sitting at the other table. I've never seen a fight in a pub or restaurant, ever. And we were both, the Iranian chap who was sitting down to this meal, were absolutely shocked. And then this huge fight erupted between these guys. Then the chap who owned the restaurant came out from the kitchen with a baseball bat
Regular thing.
and started laying into everybody on that table. And then the fish tank went.
Wow.
Somebody got thrown into the fish tank and it went crashing across the floor of the restaurant. And there were flapping exotic little fish all over the floor. And the Iranian guy said, I think it's time we left. And I said, we haven't paid. And he said, never mind.
I don't think they will be worried about that.
That was my first experience of it.
So it was almost like run for your life.
It certainly was. So we just got into the cars and drove off. That was some free meal, that one.
Yeah. But as I said, I think that they had bigger problems than unpaid bills.
I'm sure. Gosh, I don't know. There's blood everywhere. I've never seen anything like it. Of course, you see in a film, you see this sort of thing happening, and
Yeah,
and the
that's-
chairs are made out of balsa wood or something. And
Yeah, it's,
but in reality, a fight like that is horrendous. I should have prepared.
it was
I could have
great.
written a few things. Yeah. It's,
Piece of papers and read.
yeah, because actually the first time I went to Iran, when we had the surprise wedding, I went by train actually. Well, I flew student rate to Istanbul, and I met an Iranian guy on the plane sitting next to me, and he said he had friends in Istanbul, and he said that they'll put us both up for the night, which they did, and it was the mother of a friend of his who was a university professor, and they had a lovely house, and they took us down to the they gave us a meal, and very, very friendly people. And then we went to get the Van Gogh Express, which was an amazing train journey from Istanbul through to Tehran. And is this still on?
Yes, it is.
It's just worth mentioning because it's very interesting because there's a huge lake called Lake Van in eastern Turkey. And in those days, the train used to shunt on the carriages in sort of 3 sections, I think, onto a massive ferry. And none of us really knew what was happening. We thought, because, in those days, you didn't really have advance notice of what happens on these trips, or, everything was a surprise. And when the carriages had been shunted on, we were still in the carriages. We got out, and we were in the ship's hold then, of course, and we went up the staircase onto the deck level, where they had an enormous table laid out with beers and sandwiches and stuff like this, and we all had a big party on this ferry. People who'd never met before, a lot of them similar age group. And then we all got very merry, went down the staircase back into the railway carriages and fell asleep. When we all woke up, with the different little sleeper compartments, the train was moving again. And it was going from Lake Van through to the Iranian border. But we went up, there's a very steep climb from there, and the engine was having difficulty getting up this side of this mountain. And I woke up listening to guards running up and down the carriages, and they were putting brakes on because the train was going backwards.
Oh.
And what they decided that the engine wouldn't be able to pull. It was a huge diesel engine, wouldn't be able to pull the train right up the side of this mountain the way they were hoping.
So what did they do?
So anyway, so they backed down, and it was going a bit too fast, so they kept running back to the rear of each carriage and putting on these emergency brakes and shouting down to the engine, leaning out. These are the guards and the firemen and whatever you call them, the staff who run the train, and then the train backed down. I think it must have been probably about 6 miles back towards another junction. As like a big junction station, and because hardly anybody spoke English, we were all trying to find out what was going on. And they said, "There's a steam engine here." It was a huge, rusty steam engine that had been made in Birmingham, and they said, "We're going to fire it up, put in water, and we're going to tow this train back to off to Tehran because the diesel engine has got a major engine problem, and they couldn't get a replacement because it was quite a remote part of Turkey." So this ancient steam engine was fired up. It was like toy trains, we all got off the train and watched them couple it up and all the rest of it. And then that roared off, and everyone was leaning out of the windows, the cinders and smoke and stuff coming past the carriages, and it roared up the mountainside. And I think altogether we were almost a day late by the time we got to Tehran. But that was some journey. It was incredibly cheap, because I travelled first class couché for about £8.50 in those days from Istanbul
It's
through to Tehran.
one day tube ticket.
Exactly, and half the train then was Turkish and half of it was Iranian. The Iranian part, which you couldn't get, it was fully booked up, had sheets on the couché beds and scented air conditioning and this sort of thing. The Turkish part had no sheets at all. It was really basic, you know, and very noisy and no air conditioning. So you had the windows open all the time. It was very, so it was a fascinating journey, and it had a restaurant car, which was Baroque in design, and the seats had pneumatic stems on them, and you were floating, and the train was always going quite slowly, like 30 miles an hour, and you could look out onto these sort of desert areas, and watch the camels almost walking by at the same speed as the train. You know, it was a magical journey.
Definitely wasn't bullet train.
It certainly wasn't, and the one of the guys who I met on the train had been studying Middle Eastern art at the British Museum, and also Middle Eastern philosophy. And he was quite a learned sort of guy. He was older than the rest of us. And he said, David, do you know why that camel is looking so proud as we're looking out of the train window? I said, no. He said, because there are 99 names for the Prophet Muhammad, and the camel is reputed to know the 100th. This sort of thing, these little gems he would throw into the conversation. And we were drinking copious amounts of vodka, and it was like a continuous party, you know. It really was very good. That's it, really.
Okay, thank you very much, David. So guys, see you next time.